Rich teen laughs at homeless until she finds out her own fate. Homeless and struggling, Mark and his daughter find a wallet full of cash. Despite their need, Mark chooses to return it, hoping to teach his daughter about kindness. Yet, upon reaching the owner's house, he begins to doubt his decision. Mark and his 8-year-old daughter, Lolita, strolled through the city streets towards the park. The homeless shelter they called home had provided their lunch. But Mark's mind raced with worries about their future. Lolita, however, skipped alongside him, her face alight with the simple joy of being with her father. As they walked, Lolita's sharp eyes spotted something at the sidewalk's edge. "Dad, look what I found," she exclaimed, dashing towards a black wallet half buried in the grass. Inside, they found the owner's ID, which had the owner's address, credit cards, and a substantial amount of cash. Lolita's eyes sparkled with excitement. "We could buy apples, noodles, even ice cream," she chirped. Mark, however, felt the weight of morality. "We aren't going to keep it," he said firmly. "It doesn't belong to us. We wouldn't want someone to be sad about losing their wallet, would we?" "But, Father." "Lolita, the money isn't ours." "The right thing is to return it," Mark interrupted gently, and the poor man and his daughter set off to the wallet-owner's address. They arrived in a wealthy neighborhood, where their shabby appearance attracted unwelcome stares. Approaching a well-kept house, Mark second-guessed his decision. The owner seemed to be a wealthy individual, and he probably wouldn't miss the few bills in his wallet, but Mark pushed the thought away, focusing on teaching Lolita the value of honesty. Lolita knocked on the polished white door, and it creaked open. Mark braced himself, unsure of the reception they would receive. Jane, the homeowner's daughter, greeted them with suspicion and disdain. "What do you want?" she asked sharply, eyeing them with distrust. Mark held up the wallet. "Hi, my daughter and I found this and thought we'd return it. Does a man named Greg live here?" he asked. "Whatever, just leave it on the doorstep. My dad's not home," Jane dismissed them, pointing at the doormat. "We thought it'd be better to return it in person. You know, that'd be the right thing to do," Mark insisted, holding the wallet firmly. Jane's frustration grew. "Look at you, Mr. Right Thing," she mocked, "just trying to get something out of it." "That's not true," Mark retorted, defending their intentions. Lolita scooted closer to her father. "Why is she being so mean, Dad?" she whispered in her father's ears. "People sometimes misunderstand, sweetheart. Let's just focus on returning the wallet," Mark reassured her. However, Jane was disgusted by the presence of the homeless on her doorstep, and she would have continued to mock Mark if it hadn't been for Greg's arrival from work. "Sweetie, what's going on?" he asked, looking from Mark to Jane. Mark introduced himself and Lolita, explaining they found Greg's wallet and came to return it. Greg was relieved and grateful to have the wallet back. "You know, I've been looking for this all day. Was going to cancel my cards tonight." "Dad, check the money. He probably stole it," Jane accused, rolling her eyes. Greg inspected the wallet and found everything intact. "All the money is here, sweetie." "You've got it wrong," he corrected Jane, acknowledging Mark's honesty. "Why don't you guys join us for dinner?" he offered Mark and Lolita. "It's the least I can do to thank you." Jane glared at her father in disapproval. But Greg didn't change his decision, and considering Lolita was hungry, Mark gratefully accepted the unexpected offer of hospitality. Greg welcomed Mark and Lolita into his home. "Mark, why don't you sit here?" Greg suggested, pointing to a seat beside him. "Not so fast," Jane shouted, placing papers on the chair. "What are you doing, Jane?" Greg questioned, puzzled by her actions. Seeing Jane's intent, Greg took the seat himself, offering another to Mark. But despite Greg's efforts to ease the tension, Jane continued to taunt Mark and Lolita, suggesting they call a cleaning company tomorrow. "Don't mind her, Mark. She's always been obsessed with cleanliness." Greg tried to de-escalate the situation. But Jane wouldn't stop. During dinner, she served Mark and Lolita with paper plates, prompting Greg to intervene. "Why not use the nice dishes I got you for your birthday, honey?" he suggested, trying to maintain his cool. Jane reluctantly agreed, but her hostility persisted. As Mark offered to help serve the food, Jane snapped at him. "Get your filthy hands away from me." Frustrated by her behavior, Greg firmly told her to sit down. But Jane wasn't done even now. When dinner was served, Mark asked if he could say a prayer, to which she sarcastically replied, thanking God for being poor. "Why don't you tell us about yourself?" Greg asked Mark once the man finished praying. Mark began narrating his story, but Jane interrupted him with mocking comments about his homelessness. "Shut your mouth, Jane," Greg finally snapped, tired of her insensitivity. "You don't know the first thing about their lives, and misfortune could come to anyone." "I'm sorry, Mark," Greg said, turning to his guest. "It's my fault. I worked too much, and it affected my parenting." Taking this moment to reveal his own past, Greg shared a surprising truth. He had once been homeless himself, a fact he had kept from Jane but now felt compelled to disclose due to her behavior. "When Jane's mother passed away, we found ourselves in the same situation as you," Greg disclosed. "I lost everything and ended up on the streets with my little girl. She was just a toddler then," he added, his voice heavy with emotion. Jane couldn't believe it. She struggled to process what her father was saying. "Do you remember our camping trips? When I made up stories about us being treasure hunters?" Greg asked. Jane nodded, still confused. "We were actually homeless then," Greg confessed. "How did we get back on our feet?" she asked, overwhelmed by the revelation. "It was because of good people. A kind man offered me a job. That job changed our lives," Greg explained, his eyes filled with gratitude. Greg's gaze then shifted to Mark and Lolita. "When I saw Mark today, I knew it was my chance to pay it forward," he said. Mark agreed. Life's full of surprises. Sometimes a bit of kindness is all it takes to change everything. Tears sprang into Jane's eyes as she realized what she'd done. "Daddy, did we ever get offered dinner when we were on the street?" she asked innocently. "No. Most nights I managed to put some food in your belly, but I slept hungry almost every night. We barely had anything, but we had each other," Mark replied, comforting his daughter. Jane, moved by these revelations, finally understood the depth of her father's struggles and the power of compassion. Greg turned the conversation to Mark and Lolita's recent act of kindness. "Mark, how did you find my wallet?" he asked. "We were looking for a shelter when Lolita found it," Mark replied. Greg was impressed. "Do you want to work for me?" he asked Mark. "I need a driver, you know." Surprised, Mark quickly accepted. "Yes, I'd be honored. Thank you." Greg didn't stop there. "And I'll help you find a place to stay until you're back on your feet." "Really?" "Oh God, I can't thank you enough. I won't let you down. I promise I won't." Mark expressed his gratitude, his tone sincere and determined. He could already envision how this opportunity would transform his and Lolita's lives. "But Dad, are you sure about this? We don't know them," Jane told her father. "Sometimes you have to trust people, Jane. Not everyone has bad intentions," Greg reassured her. "I understand your concern, miss, but we're not here to take advantage," Mark added. "We're grateful for your father's help." As the conversation unfolded, Greg shared his own past struggles, emphasizing the importance of giving others a chance. Jane listened, her initial skepticism gradually melting away. "Sorry for what I said earlier," Jane finally admitted, regretting her words. "I judged you unfairly." Mark was kind enough and forgave her. "It's okay, miss. We all have our moments," he said. Greg then lightened the mood of the space, offering tea as a peace gesture. The conversation shifted as Greg asked Mark about his decision to return the wallet. "What made you return it?" "Not many would bother," he inquired. "It's the right thing to do, Mr. Greg. I couldn't keep something that didn't belong to me." Lolita chimed in proudly. "Daddy can never be a thief, only in games." Laughter filled the room, easing any lingering tension. Feeling a sense of newfound understanding, Jane said, "I'm sorry, Mark. I shouldn't have judged you like that." "It's water under the bridge," Mark assured her. "We learn from our mistakes." As they continued to talk, Lolita tugged at Jane's sleeve. "Can we be friends?" she asked with sincerity. Jane smiled, touched by the little girl's gesture. "Of course we can be friends." The evening ended with a sense of unity and understanding. marking the beginning of a new chapter for everyone involved. Greg extended another invitation to Mark and Lolita. "Why don't you stay here tonight? Tomorrow we'll sort out the job and living arrangements," he suggested warmly. Mark hesitated but agreed. "Thank you, Mr. Gregg. This means a lot," he replied, gratitude evident in his voice. "Can I sleep in the living room with Dad?" Lolita asked excitedly. "Sure thing, Lolita," Greg smiled. As they prepared for the night, Jane and Lolita made beds in the living room, while Greg and Mark shared a moment of reflection in the kitchen. "Mark, I'm glad you returned that wallet. It's brought us together unexpectedly," Greg confessed, washing dishes alongside Mark. "Sometimes doing the right thing leads to unexpected blessings," Mark nodded. That night they shared stories and forgiveness, learning the power of kindness and humility. The next morning, the once strangers enjoyed breakfast together, laughing and bonding over shared experiences. Their new friendship, born from a chance encounter, opened doors to new possibilities and journeys, underscoring the transformative impact of empathy and trust.